Now, it doesn't appear to you, although in our discussion earlier before the lecture, you have indicated that you're aware of this, that actually the data about us live without our control over it anymore. So many of us across the world increasingly live our lives through internet platforms. We know this. We work, shop, travel, learn, communicate, socialize, and entertain. That's a whopper of a list in terms of like the things that we do on the internet and online. And all of this is of interest to advertisers, companies, governments, in terms of building relationships, in terms of trying to figure out what we're doing with our lives. This creates immense amounts of data. It's just amazing. I even cannot keep it in my mind. I have to look up. This is measured not even terabytes, but incredibly huge amounts. That's changing also the landscapes in which we live. And I'm going to talk about data centers in a moment. But the data that's been accumulated about our movements is massive. And the governments and corporations have been collecting and mining this data and often violating various rights that we may have as citizens. I say we may because these rights are not universal. It's not the same as in China. It's not the same as in, let's say, Syria. It's not the same as in the US. It's not the same as in the UK. And you might say, well, what do I care? I live in the UK and I'm protected. Think again, because as I will demonstrate, your data actually travels without your volition. So you're sitting in one place and you're saying that I'm protected by rights in this place. Actually, your data double, all the things that you do on the internet, nicely collected and packaged, is traveling. And lo and behold, there is a data center in China that does not protect you. So you are actually a subject to Chinese law. You are subject to UK law, you're subject to American law, but the governments and corporations are not really being straight about this. So our data is traveling, and I want to illustrate this. Now, how is all this data collected? In many ways, it's collected in complex ways that we often think only in one or two occasions where actually sign and say, yes, you can collect this data, but it is more complex than that. So to simplify the ways in which data is collected about us, from us, and when we are doing things, I divide it into 4 areas. Now, the obvious one is online and voluntary. That means that's exactly when you agree with the terms of reference when you're given and you say yes, and how many of you actually read it? People say that, you know, something like Facebook has 20 pages, in some organizations have 40 pages of terms of agreement, in each of which has detailed. I myself don't read, to be honest. When I'm saying yes, I accept the agreement, who's got the time? It's too complicated, and I don't have money to hire a lawyer who's going to do the sifting for me. So I say yes, but I don't know what am I saying exactly yes to. That's online and voluntary when we do that. Now, online and involuntary is an interesting case, because once you're online, the authorities and corporations are not just simply interested in things that you have agreed to, but there are gray areas, ambiguous areas, for example, that's not covered by specific service providers. You might have agreed to a terms of reference that says the content of my talk when I'm on the phone will be encrypted. Usually that's not the case, by the way, but even in advanced versions, encrypted. Still, that doesn't cover who you call, how long you were on the phone, where were you when you were on the phone, and what were you doing on the phone as you were talking, are not covered. And they can pick up that information involuntarily from you. So you're being online, You're doing something you think that's covered by a good terms of agreement, but actually you're still volunteering data involuntarily. So this is happening a lot. Often this is called metadata. That means data about the content of what you're doing, but not necessarily the content. So often companies they look like good guys when they say, oh, well, we never look inside inside the emails. But that doesn't mean that they're not collecting data. They're also interested in between whom, what parties these emails are flying back and forth, where they are stopping, who they are copied to. That's also metadata. That's an interesting aspect of it. Now, there's also offline voluntary agreements. We just sign on, for example, say, yeah, I allow you. If you consider like doing a purchase with a Visa or MasterCard as an offline, we also agree with Visa and MasterCard to share that data online. But we don't make the connection between how offline becomes online. So we are giving this voluntarily, thinking that actually remains online, it becomes offline. Remains offline, but it becomes online. So we also do that. And one of the most insidious ways is offline and involuntary. So you have your phone, you think you turned it off, you're walking around the city, and you think that you are not engaged in online activity. It's wrong. There are many ways in which data is still collected by leaking through the Wi-Fi networks, through 3G and 4G networks, having access to your telephone, at least metadata about location, movement, and then making those connections. So here is the incredible, let's say, scary scenario, is that there is not one single moment where we are not producing data. We have become data producing subjects. There is no doubt about that. The question is there any way we can actually make intervention in this as an actor? And this is being done internationally. But before we get to that, I'll give you a couple of examples of how unintended consequences may arise. Here is, what is the most secure organization in the world? Would you dare make a guess saying probably it's the US Army? Yeah, okay. US Army is probably a pretty secure organization. US Army's bases in places around the world? Yeah, you cannot get even close to them. They are off limits, they're often not visible, and they are classified information. You cannot know where US bases are. Many of them are classified information. Well, what happens? Some army personnel, also known as soldiers and officers, actually have devices like Fitbit and Apple Watch and other kinds of devices that they use when they are jogging, when they're based on that, when they are on that base, stationed on that base, and they're doing their regular activities, morning jogging. Well, one company thought about this, and then without necessarily realizing what they're doing, released data very innocently about how people are jogging around the world, having access to that data of their Fitbit and other device data. And for a short period of time, like few hours, these were available on the web. Various webs in various US bases in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, in South America, became available because of their patterns. And of course, US Army became aware of this, and then through various channels, they were able to actually force some of them to be moved out of. But of course, on the web, there's no such thing as moved out. It moves elsewhere. This is available, if you like, on the dark net and so on. So there were interesting moments that the image that I saw showed you was from north central Niger. People have been running around in circles. Exactly who's been jogging or walking around this compound is not clear, but there's a good chance it has something to do with US Africa Command's Analysis Office, which is classified information. It became available. Of course, unless something like this happens, we don't understand and we don't realize the amount of data being collected by us when we are doing benign activities like Fitbit and other. I don't know if any one of you have either Fitbit or step counter and so on, but when I give this lecture and I ask students, I also realize people have been counting their steps without knowing, because it comes on your device, turned on by default, and lo and behold, you've been counting your steps. And it happens in some other ways as well, and I'll show you it happened to me.